Nakia here, and today I want to share with you a few of my favorite tips for reducing your at-home food waste. Now, if you have been here in our Chef It community, I'm sure you've noticed that reducing our at-home food waste is something we talk about a lot. Not only the food itself, but also the paper and plastic waste that comes along with food, which is why Chef It groceries are always delivered in reusable produce bags and canvas shopping bags. Today though, we are going to focus more on the actual reducing food part. I'm going to share 5 tips with you, and I recommend that you implement these one by one. Don't take everything on all at once, but maybe you're already doing some of these. Awesome, keep them up and add one more. And if not, then start with the one that feels the easiest for you. And then once you've got that down in practice, add one more. Each small step that we make really truly does add up to be a big difference with all of us together. And if you implement things one habit at a time, you're much more likely to stick with those habits. All right, tip number 1 is to plan your meals before leaving for the market. Now, whether you want to use Chef It's weekly meal planning guide, or your weekly planner, a dry erase board on the refrigerator or in the pantry, a digital planner, or even sticky notes. Just take a few moments to really think about it. And if you don't have your Chef It weekly meal planning guide yet, click the link below to download your copy, and you can use this printed off in paper form like I have here, or digitally in an editable PDF. However you decide to kind of plan out your meals, just do so before going to the market, and think about how long it will be before you can go to the market the next time, so that you get an appropriate amount of food, enough to cook the meals and provide the meals that you would like, but not an overwhelming amount, especially when you're thinking about fresh produce, breads, and cuts of meat, so that they end up spoiling before you can get to them. This leads to our second tip, which is to plan a catch-all meal. So I recommend doing this every week if you are somebody who likes to cook and has time to cook pretty frequently. What are catch-all meals? They are meals that are super versatile, and they're the types of meals where you can switch in and out, lots of different ingredients. Your finished dish is still gonna be delicious, and each time you play around with, what do I have in the fridge? What can I toss in here? You're gonna find a new exciting way to present this dish. So it'll keep some of those dishes that you might feel like get monotonous. If you're switching some ingredients in and out based on just what you have on hand, it can really kind of freshen up the dish and make it more exciting to eat. These are meals like fried rice, stews, grain bowls or pasta bowls, casseroles, some good breakfast catch-all meals that I like to make: omelets, breakfast lentils, breakfast hash, and quiches. If you get towards the end of your week and you can't remember what leftover ingredients you are trying to toss into your catch-all meal, that is another great use for our meal planning guide here. At the bottom of each day, we have a box where you can write in your leftover ingredients from that day. That way, whenever you go to plan your meals, you don't have to search through the pantry or the refrigerator or even freezer for those parts and pieces. You've listed them out here, and it'll just help your meal planning, and especially planning for that catch-all meal, go so much quicker. So tip number 3, only purchase the food that you will actually eat. Now I want you to be really intentional and thoughtful and realistic about what you're going to eat this week or half a week or however long it is before your next shop. How often have we thought, you know what, I'm gonna be able to do it. I'm not thinking about all the appointments I have this week. I just know that I wanna cook a lot. I'm gonna go to the grocery store, fill up my cart with a bunch of fresh produce because I want and I wish it were possible. Now, I am all for manifesting. However, let's manifest smartly and let's really look at how much time do I have in my days? Am I going to be able to cook every single day, twice a day? Or am I going to be able to cook once every 4 days? So don't fill up your basket with a bunch of fresh produce if it's going to end up causing you more stress later on in the week, thinking, oh my gosh, I bought all of this stuff, I have to get to it, and I'm not going to be able to. Now, if you can incorporate those items as snacks throughout the week and you're going to be able to eat them up, then like go for it. Yeah, but be realistic. Understand when and where you're gonna need to add in convenience foods and which convenience foods you want to include. You can always make your own convenience foods by cooking a big batch meal, separating it into portions, and then freezing it and pulling those for those dinners or lunches where you just don't have time to create something new. But whenever you go to the grocery store, be realistic about what you have time for this week. That way you're not going to be buying so much extra that you just can't get through it. Also, sometimes there are package sizes at the grocery store that are larger than what we need. Have you ever needed just like a 1/4 of an ounce, so maybe a tablespoon of basil, and the only basil you can find in the store are those like 5-ounce boxes? Maybe you really want to make that dish, you really want to add basil to it, and you want fresh basil. I totally get it, yes. What are you going to do with that extra basil, right? Be thinking ahead. So, will you have time to make pesto? You can make some pesto, freeze it, and then another day, easy pasta dish, and you have your pesto sauce ready to go. You just have to thaw it. If you don't think you're really going to have time to do that, then maybe one of your neighbors or a coworker or family member would like to use some of that basil. Just because we're not using it doesn't mean it should go to waste. Tip number 4 does piggyback off of tip number 3, but not in the market, in the kitchen. So as you're cooking, there may be times whenever you have made a meal, you thought it was only gonna be enough servings for that evening, but you're left with more leftovers. For whatever reason, you just have leftovers that you weren't planning on. If you don't see an immediate opportunity to eat that, for example, lunch tomorrow, then I recommend freezing it right away, because sometimes we just pop it in the fridge thinking, oh, there might be an opportunity. And then the next time we look at it, we say, oh, this has been in here 4 days. I don't know, is it still good? It's not even worth freezing, let me just toss it. If you freeze it right away, even if you end up being able to eat it 4 days later, it doesn't hurt the food. So I just recommend portioning things into individual portions whenever you can, popping it in the freezer, and that way it's an easy thing to thaw, and you can just thaw one portion at a time if only one person is going to be eating it. And it's not going to go bad in the fridge. You're going to be able to save it in the freezer and set yourself up for success on another day when you need a convenience food to grab. And our last tip, tip number 5, is I think the most exciting. It is the most time consuming in some ways, but I think it's a great way to invite more curiosity and experimentation into the kitchen. So whenever you are looking at your fridge and you say, oh my gosh, I planned, but I still have extra ingredients, leftover vegetables, maybe fruit, whatever it may be, I don't want to throw it away, but I know it's going to go bad pretty soon. Play around with different ways to preserve your food. Pickling is one of my favorites. Alrighty, I've eaten a lot of my favorites out of here, so you'll see mostly cauliflower, which is fine. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite pickled veggie, but there's green beans up here and a couple floating carrots. Those are some of my favorites. Of course, cucumbers for like traditional pickles, but you don't have to do separate jars for each veggie. You can put them all in a jar together, mix up a pickling brine, pour it over, and keep them in the fridge. If you want a pickling brine recipe, go ahead and scroll down and we've got it right below. You can also experiment with fermenting foods, so creating like a kimchi or a fermented slaw. These slaws can be a great garnish on a whole host of different meals. And they are good for your gut health too. So think about removing moisture from your food in order to preserve it. So you can dry things into chips, like a banana chip or a carrot chip. Or for fresh herbs, you can dry those and crush them up and then use those in recipes that call for dried herbs. With my basil example earlier, right, you can make pesto out of the basil. You could if you have extra parsley, you could do chimichurri, you can make a gremolata. So depending on what herbs you have on hand, consider blending those down into a sauce, and you can use that right away. Or if it's something you want to hold on to and use later, then you can portion it out, pop it in the freezer. I love popping things in the freezer, and label it so that you know what it is, and then it's there for you to use. And then with fruits, you could consider cooking them down and making a jam or a jelly out of them. And then you can eat that on your breakfast toast if you want. You could, if you're a big baker, you can use it as a layer in cakes. Or if you like making cocktails. I've even made some really yummy cocktails with using a jam or jelly, similarly to how I would use a simple syrup, except that there's two ways that you can do it. So the first is a little more foolproof. Whenever you are getting ready to make that cocktail, you can put maybe like a tablespoon of the jam or jelly into a small saucepan with half a tablespoon or so of water and cook it on very low heat while stirring it. In this process, you aren't trying to actually cook it any further. You just want to thin that jam or jelly out. That way it's not chunky in your cocktail. Now, if your jam or jelly is already on the thinner side and you don't want to go through the process of like getting some dishes dirty and all of that, you can, if it's going to be in a shaken cocktail, and especially if you're going to have other fruit chunks in it. So maybe you're like muddling some blueberries in the bottom, and then you want to add in a little bit of apple pear jam that you made. So you can put that in the bottom with the blueberries, muddle it together, add your ice and alcohol, and then shake it really well. And the mixture of like the chunks of blueberry that are already in the cocktail, plus the friction helping break down that jam or jelly, is gonna make it so that as you're drinking it, it's not gonna give you a weird mouthfeel, but it's gonna be quite delightful and delicious. One more way to make that food go a little bit longer is by making infusions. So olive oil and alcohol are the two top infusion liquids. You can put herbs, garlic, citrus peels in your olive oil. You could also do that with alcohol. Whenever you are infusing olive oils or alcohols or any other things that you can think of that you want to infuse, it's important that your physical item is completely submerged in the olive oil or the alcohol, and that this is kept in a sealed bottle. So you just don't want any more air exposure than what is in the bottle. And that will keep it safe to eat. I hope that you have learned a little bit today. Like I said, please choose one of these tips to add into your routine today. And after you've got that one under your belt, then visit us again, pick out another one, and continue until you've reduced your at-home food waste as much as possible. Now, as much as we try, it is very difficult to reuse, reconsume 100% of our food waste. So whenever it does happen, consider starting compost. Please consider composting. There are a lot of different composting options, whether you have a backyard or if you live in an apartment somewhere where you don't have outside area to do it. Also, some cities have their own composting programs that you could become a part of. And check out our blog for more composting information if you're kind of unsure what foods can or cannot go into a compost. If you participate in a city composting program, check out your city's website. They will tell you exactly what you can or cannot put into the city compost. Each small step that we take added together really can make a difference. The average American throws away about between 30 and 40% of the food they bring home. 30 to 40% of the food that they bring home, they throw away. Statistic is so mind-blowing, I can't even speak. If you could cut your waste in half from the average. So you're throwing away about 15%. That's a big difference. And then if you can cut that in half again, and just think about if every family was making an effort to cut it down as much as they can, it will really benefit our environment collectively. And then individually, the food that you bring home and throw away, you're just wasting that money. So you're gonna help your wallet. Thanks, Chefeteers.